What the Actual Fork podcast is co-hosted by two intuitive eating registered dietitians, yours truly, Sammy Previtt, owner of Fine Food Freedom, and Jenna Warner, owner of Happy Strong Healthy. We can't stand diet culture bullshit and love keeping it real. Our mission is for all humans to believe that they are made for so much more than chasing a smaller body. We are also here to share with you that food can be fun and pleasurable again. Although we are medical professionals, we are human too. We are not afraid to share our deepest, darkest secrets and how years of our lives were taken by diet culture. We started this podcast so no human has to feel alone in their journey towards food freedom. So get comfy and join us for a casual convo where you can expect to laugh, cry, learn, and grow. Welcome back to another episode of What the Actual Fork podcast. Today, we are super excited to kind of unpack our relationship with alcohol part 2. We had I think the funny thing is we had part 1 when we were still called drunk dietitians.
So, it was when we were deciding we were changing our names.
Got it. That was it. So we have the one and only Veronica Valli here with us today, and she is changing the narrative on sobriety. She's been continuously sober since May 2nd, 2000, and with 20 years of experience as a recovery coach and psychotherapist, she understands that there is no one path to recovery. She is the author of the book Soberful: Uncover a Sustainable, Fulfilling Life Free of Alcohol, published by Sounds True, and the co-host of the Soberful podcast. Veronica has helped thousands of women not only recover from alcohol, but also transform their lives.
Veronica teaches that alcohol is not the problem. It's only a symptom of a deeper underlying problem. She helps women dig deep, embrace change, and become who they are meant to be. I return people to themselves, quote unquote, she says. Veronica works with women and men all over the world through her successful and innovative online recovery programs. She has developed the Soberful program into an online subscription community, Soberful Life, and now based in the US after relocating from the UK. She is married and lives on Lake Tahoe with her 2 sons and her husband.
Yes. And as Jenna says many times, my face is lighting up this entire time throughout the entire episode.
Flowing in more than just a pregnancy way right now.
Thank you. But it's just, as you kind of pulled together in this episode, there's a lot of parallels with relationship with alcohol, relationship with food. And so really the intention behind this is to not shame or guilt anybody who drinks alcohol or enjoys alcohol or has even maybe, had a problem with alcohol, but to just continue to get curious, to learn and grow. So that's exactly what we're going to do today. So here's our episode with Veronica Valli. Welcome back to another episode of What the Actual Fork podcast. Today we have Veronica Valli with us. Veronica, thank you so much for being here with us.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I was really looking forward to this one.
And I feel like we had to just press record right away because there was so much that I wanted to get into, but I didn't want to have the really good, juicy conversation off air. Before we get into anything, and I know we didn't really share much with you off air, Jenna and I have been super open about our relationship with alcohol over the past few years of podcasting. And ironic enough, we did not share this with you, and I don't.
You're going to go there right now?
Yeah, I'm going to go there. Our podcast, just to show Veronica the growth we've had, our podcast started as drunk dietitians because
look at us differently now, Veronica.
No, I felt like we had to share that with her because we're going to get into I'm going to use heavy air quotes. I think you call it the land in your book and what that means. And Jenna and I were such subscribers of wellness culture and we're the fun dietitians, and we quickly learned how not only toxic that name was, but how much it didn't serve us anymore as we continued to heal our relationships with food and body and alcohol and all the things. So I just thought you would find that super ironic as we kick off this episode.
You know what I love about that, because I remember you did tell me is and I love that you have evolved, because there's such a what's the word, blind spot with that. I'm always kind of like going after what the wellness people, from yoga to clean alcohol to dietitians who are green juice in this and organic that and it's like, but there's such a cultural like blind spot, like we just don't go there with alcohol, so that I mean, I guess through your work you couldn't ignore what was right in front of you. But that's just an example of how we normalize a really toxic substance.
Yes. Yes. Thank you for saying that and making us feel better. But we always say, like, we swear on this podcast, just so you know, we like to publicly fuck up so others can learn and grow alongside of us. And Jenna and I have very different stories, and Jenna, I want you to definitely get into yours eventually, but just more backside for you, Veronica, as we uncover this conversation is, I am 210 days sober today, but I'm also pregnant, so that's a part of it. But we're going to unpack how there's a part of me that led me to your book when I found myself saying, I wish I could just be pregnant forever so I don't have to drink again. And I was like, whoa, there's a lot to unpack here, because why does that mean I have to drink again if I'm not pregnant? So we will review that in a bit, because I definitely want to get to it. But first up, we love to start our episodes with a what the actual fork moment, something that stopped you in your track within the alcohol and wellness space that you've seen recently. What has just stopped you in your track and made you say, what the actual fork?
So I think for me, it's the whole clean wine thing. So I noticed on my I get, obviously because of the algorithm, and I'm always mentioning and writing about alcohol, I do get a lot of alcohol adverts, which I can then, just get rid of. But then I started noticing, probably, I don't know, within a couple of years, I want to say something like that, like clean wine. There's lots of I don't know, we don't have this very long word, so no hangovers with it. Like lots of products around heavily implying that this alcohol was healthy, and I was like, what the fuck? And then seeing wellness experts, qualified nutritionists, dietitians, blah 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 blah, promoting clean, like this is, I will not touch or promote any other alcohol apart from this clean wine. It's organic. They do not use pesticides and all these other things that they don't use. And I'm just like, the denial. And I call them out and I say, you're a fake wellness expert. You cannot be a healthy, yoga-y wellness person and in any way promote or advocate drinking alcohol, because it's a carcinogen. It's a central nervous system depressant. If strawberries did this, you'd never touch another strawberry. But it's that just cultural blind spot that we have. So there's this, and I've been going after the clean wine stuff for a while, because it heavily implies that it's healthier, and that is not a thing. There's no such thing. It's impossible. It's not a thing. It doesn't exist. But the marketing is saying it's a thing, and it isn't.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think one thing I want to just kind of start this conversation with, that of course, every single person listening to this podcast or this episode has a different relationship with alcohol, is at a completely, maybe they've never even thought about alcohol as a relationship, or maybe they kind of, like you said, compartmentalized it into like, okay, I'm going to be healthy and explore my relationship with food, but like alcohol is its own thing over here. And I know in your book, you talk about, you're not only talking about people that are searching for sobriety, but maybe just curious about like an alcohol-free life, who maybe never struggled with an addiction to alcohol. So I would love to kind of start this conversation off with, in your book, you talk about, I believe you reference it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, it's like the land, like what alcohol promises you versus what we actually get from it. So can you kind of jump off and explain some of that to our listeners?
So what's really interesting is, if you think, you ladies, I'm almost 50, you guys are probably in your 20s or 30s, but if you think about how we grew up, not drinking was never presented as an option, right? You're going to get you're going to become an adult, you're going to get a driver's license, you're going to get a job, and you're going to drink alcohol. It was also very, it was just assumed. So not drinking alcohol was never presented to me as a something, unless you were like a Mormon or a Muslim or something, but everybody drank. So and the reason that we don't question that, the reason that we want to drink as adults and as teenagers, is we have been conditioned by our culture, by our peer groups, and by the media to believe that alcohol is the best and most effective way to get to the land of fun, excitement, belonging, connection, relaxing, rewarding yourself, romance, and sex. Now, I want all of those things. Those things all sound fabulous. And my culture tells me alcohol's the best vehicle. Where, hey, off we go. So as we age, even, into our 20s, as that progresses, what nobody tells us is, and I want to be clear here, you can get those things with alcohol, but there's always a cost. Every single time there's a cost. So for me, when I was a teenager, it was really bad hangovers. I mean, I was also very unreliable and, but when you're two, who cares, So there was always a cost. And because nobody ever spoke about that cost, you just kind of rationalize it away, that it's worth it. It's worth it. But that, as we get older, year by year, that cost increases and the benefits decrease. And we get kind of in this place where we're aware of the costs. We feel like crap. We do something embarrassing or shameful, or we miss a deadline or whatever it is. And we just think, I just have to manage it better. If I can just manage, clean wine, that'll help me manage it. But, if I just can manage it better and balance, and everyone goes through this, and the research shows us we do it for 10 years of just trying to figure out that magic formula of being able to drink so I can go to the land but not have the consequences, before people get to a point where they accept that they're not winning, and abstinence, then they have to stop. And then there's just this massive grief because we believe we will never get to that land ever again. And that feels, I got sober at 27. I 100% believed that. 100% thought I never was going to have fun again, never go dance again, never get laid again. Just like, I was just going to be very boring. And the only reason that I had so many mental health problems, anxiety and panic attacks and all that kind of stuff, I just wanted peace. So I reluctantly accepted that deal. And I was completely wrong.
Thank you so much for sharing all of that. And I think I can relate. My story is a little different, but so I struggled with infertility for about 2.5 years and went through multiple rounds of IVF and was kind of forced, I'm going to use heavy air quotes, forced into sobriety. I thought, if I'm going to be going through these very expensive infertility treatments, why the hell would I be adding alcohol into the mix, especially with all the drugs and hormones and things. And so going through that period of heavy grief and just so much shit being stirred up. And then I just took away a coping mechanism and a numbing agent and the land and all these beliefs. It was so hard. And you talk about that in your book, how the first kind of, depending on obviously the time period for whoever and what they're going through, walking away from alcohol is not easy. And then the 4, I forget how you categorize them, but the 4 different kinds of people that will kind of try to pull you back in, even as someone going through infertility treatments, just one drink won't hurt, right? Because they're projecting, what does it say about me if you don't drink alcohol? So that, going through that was crazy. But then once you get through it and you process through it, and again, now it's been a longer time, I just think to myself, wow, you just unpack all the beliefs that you hold about alcohol, and okay, what was I taught about alcohol? Why do I feel this way? Look at our marketing, look at the wellness culture. And there's just so much there.
Yeah. And I want to say there that, that's a really important thing, that you were trying to get pregnant and you stopped drinking, and that was your coping mechanism and numbing out. That's not the purpose of alcohol. but we've kind of accepted that, like, bad day at work, have a drink, argument with your boyfriend, have a drink, and the purpose, if we're going to say and I don't, we can't ban alcohol, we shouldn't. It's appropriate at, on very occasionally with food or a celebration, that. But what happens is because it's everywhere and it's totally expected that we're going to drink, we default to alcohol to manage our emotional lives. So when that happens, when we default to alcohol as numbing, I deserve it, I need it, we don't have the bandwidth to develop really important emotional tools that every human being needs. And so often when we stop drinking, we can feel a bit at sea, and we can also feel like emotional teenagers, because that's how I felt. I didn't know how to deal with disappointment or frustration or rejection, or fear was a big one. I didn't like I had no role models for that. My feelings were squashed down in my family. So when I stopped drinking, like, I felt like my skin was off. Like, I didn't know how to navigate life, and I just didn't have any of these tools, and I had to learn them.
So I am going to be totally transparent. I have not read this book. I do know that I want to. I know that when Sam, I hope anybody who watches this recording on video sees how like glowy and excited Sam's face is. She's super inspired me into this conversation. But my question to you is, I also, I don't know how I guess the only terminology is I am not sober. I do drink on occasion. My history with alcohol, I grew up in a family with my grandfather and one of my uncles were alcoholics, both sober. My grandfather was sober 20 years before he passed. And I believe my uncle just passed his 10-year mark, which is amazing. And for me personally, I definitely abused it, like Sam and I have talked about in previous episodes, in college. But I do feel strongly, and please feel free to rip me apart for saying any of these things, but I do feel strongly that I have control over my choices and I have really strong coping mechanisms for my emotions. But I do enjoy a glass of wine or whatever it is with dinner with my husband. So my question to you is, and again, please feel free to use me as a case study and tear me apart. I can take it. But do you believe at all, in your professional opinion, that it is possible to have a very air quotes healthy relationship with alcohol?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I do love what you said, though, that like it's a toxin and there's nothing health promoting about it. And I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious your response.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to make it clear, I'm not against alcohol or drinking at all. That what my beef is with the lie, is the alcohol lie, that it's that it's the best way to get to the land, or it's the lie that I have the problem with. So Jenna, it's really about cost benefit analysis. That even so, here's the thing: 2 or 3 glasses of wine a week, which for I think most people think that's like almost negligible. That's enough for a woman to raise her risk of breast cancer by 15%. So alcohol is related to so many cancers. I mean, so many preventable cancers. So it's about the cost benefit. And I always say to people, that's what I do with clients. We do a cost benefit analysis. And so we can really see what the cost is, what we spend in money, time, how it impacts relationships, our integrity, all of that kind of stuff. And if you're all right with the cost, crack on. So my husband rarely drinks. He would have, like, if we went for dinner with a couple who had a bottle of wine, he would have a glass and finish half of it. And he has, like, he loves this liquor called Desano, and he likes the taste. He puts it like in his soup. And maybe he has 4 drinks a month, maybe some months not even any. So it has its place in this world, absolutely. I drink Diet Coke. I know that that's not good for me, and I really try and watch how much of that. I'm currently now, my cholesterol's shot up, and I'm like on this like mission to get it down so I don't have to go on statins, because I know it's lifestyle. So I'm cutting out all kinds of things to do that. So I don't think there's any human being who doesn't have a bit of chocolate cake or a Diet Coke or a glass of wine. It's fine. It's about how much space it rents in your head, which is bandwidth, and if you're prepared to pay the cost for it. I mean, I think the biggest message that I'd like women to hear from this, and I really don't get the sense that young women or most women fully comprehend that alcohol's very different in the female body than it is in the male body, and it is at the root of so many cancers, infertility, perimenopause. I mean, people who have menstrual cycles that it doesn't help at all with, you know, PMS or perimenopause or any of that kind of stuff. So, but we're so reluctant to let go of it. So, but a glass of wine here and there, again, it's like a Diet Coke here and there. Diet Coke is not as bad as alcohol, let me just say that. But we all need to have a little thing, right? Every so often. It's about balance. But if it's, I give an analogy, it's in the book, about sandwiches. So people who have a problem with alcohol do 4 things. And this is, some of your listeners may be thinking, well, I don't know, do I have a problem or not? So people who have a problem do 4 things. They drink, they think about drinking, they think about not drinking, and they recover from drinking. And it's the thinking about not drinking that is the big indicator. So people who don't have a problem with alcohol will think about alcohol in the same way that I think about sandwiches. So I might have a sandwich for lunch today, and that's lovely. And tomorrow I'll have some soup, and the next day I'll have salad. And maybe at the weekend I'm at a party and a plate of sandwiches goes by, and I think, oh, I'll have a couple of those. That's nice. And then the plate goes round again. I'm like, no, I'm good. That's literally how much I spend thinking about sandwiches. So it's bandwidth. It's if alcohol's renting space in your head, if you're arguing with yourself about whether you're going to drink tonight or not, or like, you know, maybe you should have a dry January, in my opinion, only people who have an issue with alcohol do dry January. Like my husband would never think about doing dry January. It just would never occur to him, because he thinks about alcohol the same way I think about sandwiches. So if you are thinking about alcohol more than I think about sandwiches, it's a red flag. That, because nobody, we didn't come here to have an argument with ourselves for 40 years about whether we're going to have a glass of wine or not tonight. We have way more important things to do. Way more important things. Does that make sense, Jenna? I didn't rip you apart, did I?
Oh, you were very kind. Thank you. And I completely agree. I really do. And this conversation even has me just thinking a little bit deeper. I mean, I would never do dry January either. But it's definitely one of those conversations where when you are asked the questions and your immediate response feels like a little bit defensive, you know that there's more work to do, right? And I'm not having that response currently, but there have been times that Sam and I have actually had this conversation where there were like defensiveness is coming up first. And that's where I know I need to dig deeper. So if any of our listeners are experiencing any of that right now, we invite you to break out that journal.
And I want to make this clear, because I want your listeners to take this message more than any other. And this is why we try and manage alcohol, is because of the belief system about going to the land. You can get to the land of fun, excitement, belonging, connection, relaxing, rewarding yourself, etc., sober, and it's better. It's better. And also there's so many great alcohol-free wines and spirits, because, you know, we do want a grown-up drink. It's totally appropriate to have dinner with your husband and want to have a grown-up drink on a Friday night in a nice glass. Like, that's okay to do that. But it's not actually necessary anymore to ingest the alcohol part, because there's so many great products on the market where you can have that grown-up drink that's a Chardonnay or whatever it is without the alcohol content in it. So I want people to know that you don't give up anything when you stop drinking, that you don't miss out on anything. It's the complete opposite.
Yes. I love this conversation. And Jen, I'm so happy that you asked that question too, because I know, Veronica, you mentioned that in the book, like using your husband as the example, the sandwich example, and or like you have friends that, similar to Jenna, can have a glass of wine not think twice, enjoy it, and move on, and not think of it more than the sandwich. And that is such a parallel to the work that we do as intuitive eating dietitians. When we help people make peace with food, when they come to us, they can't even be in the same room, let's say, as a cookie or a box of cookies, right? Because they're going to eat the whole thing. They're going to feel guilt. They're going to feel shame. And then we help them make peace with it, where it's like, oh, it's just a cookie. Right now, of course, alcohol is different, like if there's an addiction involved and those types of things. But I love that you use that example. And I think I want to shift this conversation a little bit to, I believe, Jenna, it was episode 36 where we did our relationship with alcohol. And we talked a lot about our college years. And we have a lot of young listeners here. And I think not only college years, I know a lot of people, I'm 30 years old. I know a lot of people well into their 30s that are acting like we did at college. And because that's normal, right?
Because we've normalized abnormal drinking.
Yes.
As long as you've got a house and a job and a car, you don't have a problem, is how we perceive it.
Yes, right? As long as you do all these other things, you don't get fired from your job because of alcohol, all the things. So I love when you talk about, so a dysfunctional relationship with alcohol stems from the abandonment of ourselves to meet our connection needs, right? And two of those important questions are, do you like yourself? And do you behave in ways that enable you to like yourself? And then I wrote down, because we can't belong to anywhere but ourselves. And so in the book, you talk so much about how sobriety, or just alcohol-free life, like it's that journey to returning to yourself. And I literally have pages, Veronica, that I went over with my therapist that were like such breakthroughs of just like, because I feel like when I reparent myself and do like inner healing work, I always go to the high school and college version of Sammy. And there was so much shame. There was such a lack of self-esteem. And you literally go through on page 74, a very detailed kind of breakdown of how we use alcohol as that vehicle when, like you said, we don't have the tools, and when we don't have the emotional intelligence and we can't set the boundaries, we use alcohol as this tool, but then that only increases the shame, right? Decreases our self-esteem, but it's the only thing we know how to turn to. So I know I just threw so much at you, but I would love to just hear like where you take that and how you could address anybody that might feel that way.
So let me clarify what being sober and being alcohol free is first. So I'm sober because I had a massive problem with alcohol, and I absolutely used alcohol because I felt so uncomfortable in my own skin. Alcohol was the solution for me, and then it very much quickly became the problem. Alcohol free is more people who are, they drink a bit, they don't like the consequences. They're not kind of, thinking about not drinking, but every so often they're like, and they're kind of just recognizing, you know what, I actually don't need to drink. I actually, it doesn't really bring a whole lot to me. I can actually enjoy the event or the whatever without it. I'm quite happy with a, grown up non-alcoholic drink. So more and more people are recognizing that and just becoming alcohol free because they're just seeing that the cost isn't worth it, but they don't necessarily have so much of a, like a problem with it. So, one of the things in my world that's talked about a lot is trauma, and how trauma is the root of an addiction problem. And I have a lot of clients who'll be like, I had really good parents, I had a pretty good, my childhood, and can't really think of anything that happened. I mean, I had ups and downs, but they get really stuck on that. So how I explain it is, I mean, of course, trauma, like some kind of abuse or, that we can see kind of how that would lead into wanting to use a substance to numb ourselves. But we have two primary needs when we're children. We have attachment, which we know about. We know that infants do not thrive without attachment. And we have attachment needs throughout our lives. That never goes away. We kind of focus on childhood, but we have attachment needs very much as teenagers. And adults, and certainly when we become elderly. And the other need that we have as children is authenticity, to be our authentic selves. And what happens is we sometimes inadvertently, the family of origin that we grow up in, we discover that this authentic part of ourselves is not acceptable in our family. So it could be, for example, a good example of this would be if you were perhaps gay and you grew up in a family that loved you and you know, wonderful family events, but being gay was not going to be accepted. So you had to hide that part of your authentic self. And we do that as children because we know that we, you know, especially when we're young, to survive, we have to have these people looking after us. But it can happen in many other ways. You know, I felt like that in terms of my family just didn't do feelings and emotions whatsoever. And I have these massive feelings and emotions and I'm just like, huge. And that was just like so not approved of, that I felt like I just couldn't be who I really was. And as I started drinking at 14, 15, a binge drinker, and it really, and I felt so uncomfortable in my own skin because I couldn't be who I really was, because I didn't feel approved. I mean, still to this day, I'm 49, when I'm around my aunts or mother and I'll, you know, say whatever I'm doing and they'll go, oh, what are you doing that for? Like in this kind of like, Veronica, or like just this kind of sort of disapproving, whatever. So I really had to push that part of myself down, and that is painful. And I think, you know, it could be all sorts of things, you know, and I when we parent, we don't always realize that we're doing this. I remember when I have two boys, and my youngest was 4, my oldest was 4, and he was doing show and tell at pre-K, and he literally, I was like, oh, you know, you have to show your turn to do show and tell, go and get a toy or whatever you want to bring. And he came back with like literally like this bit of plastic rubbish. And I'm like, Xavier, you can't, like, you need to bring, I was like, oh, Nan had sent him this plane from England, like this, you know, British plane. I was like, why don't you take that? And you can talk about Nana being in England. It's like, no, he wanted to take this bit of plastic rubbish. And I was like getting more and more cross with him. Like, no, you know, choose that. What about this? What about that? And then I had this moment where I was like, oh, I want him to have the experience I want him to have. And he needs to have his own experience. And as soon as I saw it, I was like, oh, absolutely fine. If you want to take that, no problem. And every week he would find the strangest, like, bizarre thing. And I'm like, no problem. Because that's what the experience, and I was trying to make him how I wanted him to be. And I think we do that inadvertently into different levels. So if it's bad enough, alcohol, again, so then we grow up and we're in this culture that is giving us all this messaging that everything will be solved and everything will be better and you will feel included and part of if you drink this substance, because it made me feel so comfortable in my own skin. At first, it really made me, for the first hour or two, that's how it made me feel. But then, of course, I really, really lost myself. I just moved so far away from myself and became someone I didn't recognize. And there's nothing worse than saying and doing something, even as you're saying and doing it, knowing that that is not remotely authentic for you. That is not who I am, but yet you are doing it. So when we stop drinking, part of the process is the return to our authentic self. And that takes time. It is a process, but there is nothing, that's where the magic of sobriety happens. Because when we are our authentic self, there's no buzz better than that.
I love that. That needs to be on a t-shirt or something. You need to have stickers or merch or something that says that one-liner on there.
I'm working on t-shirts and I use it as a hashtag. We are having more fun than you are.
I love that. But I think that's why your book has hit so much home with me. And again, I don't even know, you know, after I give birth, what my relationship with alcohol will look like. But again, I do know that those thoughts were there of just like, I don't know how it's serving me anymore. And so I keep coming back to that. And I think your book has been such a great invitation to get curious about my relationship with alcohol and just where my beliefs came from it. And like you started just unpacking the authenticity piece, how it's really like not about the alcohol. It's all like, okay, well, once we remove alcohol, then the magic starts to happen. And that's what has just been so moving about your book. So I know we do not, for sake of time, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I did just want to quickly touch on, if we can, mommy wine culture, rosé culture targeted towards females. So if you could just give us your kind of words of wisdom or thoughts on that culture.
Yeah, so it's a recent trend in the last maybe 5 to 10 years. I've seen it, and I talk about this a lot, and it's the gaslighting of mothers, because especially in the United States, motherhood is really hard, and there's no affordable childcare. You're completely isolated. Your body goes through this enormous change. There's nothing in I don't think UK's marginally better. Countries like Scandinavia do a really good job, but it's you were told this message: you can have everything, you can have a high flying career, you can be a mother, you can look fabulous at all times. And then I think you become a mother and you realize what a great big fucking lie that was. And it's not true, because you can't, unless you can afford the nanny and the cleaner and the driver, you can't have all of those things. It's impossible. And it's so hard, and you're so sleep deprived. And then it's just this messaging, mummy needs what? Happy mummy, happy life, and this rise of day drinking play dates. I mean, I've gone off to quite a few of them. There was like a day drinking a mummy group did a day drinking festival. They had mummy play date wine. I have a book here. I ordered it. Mummy drinks wine because of you. I mean, it's just, it's absurd. And it's gaslighting, because mothers should be fucking angry, really angry that we are not being accommodated or catered for, and we're told it's our fault. But here's the other thing about it. Again, I was at a couple of weeks ago. My kids' elementary school had a fundraiser evening. There was a band food, all that kind of stuff, and the ticket included, I think, a glass or two of wine. Fabulous. That was lovely that parents could go out and have a glass or two and enjoy themselves. Really nice. But it's being portrayed as a parenting aid, and for me, this all falls apart because people, I get pushback on this. And for a while I was like, I know there's something really not right here, and I couldn't figure out what it was. All our kids are fine. They're taken care of. This is us just having a play date and a glass or two. There's nothing wrong with that. And I'm like, what if you were all black? What if you were all black mothers having a play date with wine? I wonder if people would think it was so funny. And having now researched this and talked to lots of different people, and I work with a diversity and inclusion consultant, and she's like, there's just no way I could walk around with a t-shirt saying, tequila or whatever, because we are judged differently. And so there's a lot of white privilege. And if you look at it, it's all white women. It's all white women, and it's harmless and it's cute and it's funny. You replace that with black women, it's a very different perspective. So again, I'm not against mums getting together and have a glass of wine. That's not, you do need socialization, and you need groups, and you need support. It's the marketing of it as a parenting age. And again, what is implied in all of that is that it's harmless and it's not a problem. And that's a lie. It's not true. I was 10 years sober when I had my first son, but my best friend, who drinks very occasionally, I mean, she said to me, like, she said, you just can't drink when you have a kid. It's awful. She said she had 2 glasses once, and I was just, it's awful having a toddler and a headache and not enough sleep. It's awful. So, I mean, her drinking really, I mean, she's like 2 glasses a week maybe. So I think it's a massive betrayal of women, and it's really out of balance. Again, okay for mums to get together and have a drink, but it's not a parenting aid, and it is not without significant cost.
I think this conversation just made me realize that alcohol culture is part of diet culture. I mean, the way that we've really never kind of made that connection before, but you're absolutely right. The way that it's marketed and definitely focused on white women. Yeah, it's a lot. And I can definitely agree with your friend that having more than one drink in an evening and having a toddler sucks. So it's not worth it. That cost analysis is just not there.
And yeah, and so you don't need to have alcohol to get to the land. If that cost is just not working for you, because all of these belief systems, and one of the most core ones is alcohol equals fun, sober equals boring. And that's what I rally against is we believe that we're going to just be boring and great, and none of those things are true. I want to just blow up all of those myths that we have that, like, I've been sober almost 22 years, and if this wasn't fun, I'd have been drunk 21 years ago. So I don't do it now because I'm older, but when I first got sober when I was 28, so you were talking about college, I wanted to go out clubbing and to concerts and flirt with men and do all those things. And I was doing it sober. And that's when I had this massive, like, I just had an amazing, like, I danced, I did all this, I had great conversations. And I spent, like, I don't know, $12. And I got up at 8 a.m. on Sunday and went for a really long run. It's like, oh my God, this is so much better. And then you start looking at people who are drinking and drunk. And I just think that looks really unattractive. I'm really glad I'm not doing that because that looks awful. But my whole kind of philosophy is it's the emperor's new clothes. And I'm the little boy going stark bollock naked.
Yes. And I feel like too, when you were just talking about the example at the bar, I think you talk about this in your book, and I know I can recall this from college as well, is like that fake connection that alcohol gives us, right? So when you're out at the bar and you're like all over somebody, maybe you're blackout making out with somebody, which I know a lot of my friends did in college, in our group.
Which is a horrible experience.
Horrible. Or even just like you found like you found your new best friend in the line in the bathroom and you're hugging, and then like the next day you're like mortified, or you're like, I don't even know who that was, or like that fake connection kind of piece, right? There's just so much. I could literally talk to you for hours, and it's all so good. But I think what we would love to end this conversation with, Veronica, is if you could just give listeners, like if they walk away from this episode remembering one thing, or maybe getting curious about a few questions or takeaways where they can start to explore their relationship with alcohol, what would you want them to hear?
Well, obviously a lot of it is in the book, but I think the most important thing I want people to know is when we're having that argument with ourselves about drinking or not drinking, how much we're going to drink, all of that kind of stuff, we only have a finite amount of bandwidth, and bandwidth is space in our heads and energy. So when we're thinking about drinking, thinking about not drinking, arguing with ourselves, maybe that's 20 or 30% of our bandwidth. Now, you can do a lot with 70% bandwidth. You can have a career, you can finish college, you can go on nice holidays, you can buy a house, you can do loads. But what you can't do is emotionally grow in the way that you're capable of. So when you stop drinking, you access this hidden 20 to 30% of bandwidth that you've not had access to before. And in my experience of doing this work for over 2 decades, that is where your extraordinariness is. And I see this in everybody who stops drinking. I see them access their extraordinariness. And there's not, like, what you get from alcohol, it doesn't even come close to that. And I don't want people to miss out on their extraordinariness. And so I want people to know you don't miss out on anything when you stop drinking. You gain. You gain. There is a process. You do have to go through a process where it is a grief process. It does, because the messaging is so deep. But if you keep going, you get into this new land, and all sobriety is a shift in perception. It's all it is. You just see everything differently. I would as much drink a glass of wine as I would drink a glass of bleach. I mean, it doesn't bring anything, because I have access to my bandwidth and my extraordinariness, and my life keeps expanding because I don't have any of the costs.
That was so well said. And there's so much to think about walking away from this episode. So for all of our listeners, Veronica, where can you just let them know the title of the book, where they can get the book, and where they can best find you on the internet?
Yeah, so the book is, so it's Veronica Valli, Valli, and the book is Soberful, Uncover a Sustainable, Fulfilling Life Free of Alcohol. It's on all of the platforms, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, etc. Instagram, I'm Veronica J. Valli. And Facebook, I have a Facebook group called Soberful. If you Google my name and Soberful, all of those things should come up.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
Guys, thank you so much for listening to another episode of What the Actual Fork Pod. We know there are a lot of pods out there, and we are so grateful that you are here listening with us. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe, like, share with all your friends and faves, and follow along with us on social at What the Actual Fork Pod. We promise to continue to bring you the hottest topics, greatest guests, and the most fun you can possibly have while fighting diet culture bullshit. We love you, we appreciate you, and we will see you next week for a lot more fun.